Hello, this is Professor JPS, and this is the Streamlined Lecture for Communication Arts 101, Sections 1 and 2. So if you had class Monday and Wednesday from 10 to 11:30, and if you've had class Tuesday evenings from 5:30 to 8:25, this is the lecture you need for the Internet chapter, Chapter 6, which is our last chapter that we're technically going over. And this evening, this is very late Saturday evening, April 25th. I guess it's the 26th. It's after midnight, but this would have been the lecture for Monday morning and Tuesday evening of April 27th for the Monday class and April 28th for the Tuesday evening class. Okay. And this evening, I want to talk about the chapter, full chapter 6, discussing aspects of the internet. And prior to talking about the things in that particular chapter with the corresponding textbook pages, I want to just chat a little bit about the history of the internet, some of the things that aren't in the textbook. Some of the things in the textbook are relatively obvious and relatively easy to understand because you have lived it. You're really the first full generation that has absorbed digital media and the internet so much. From the time probably you were in 3rd or 4th grade, you've been pretty skilled at utilizing digital media, and it's become second nature to you. So like all of the other media that we've discussed, film or television or magazines or newspapers, the internet too has a history. And I just want to kind of sketch some of that out and give you a sense of the proportions that allowed for a decade by decade renewal of energies to get us from nothing in the post-World War II period to today where everything is digitized. This is a one-on-one class, and right from the first class, we discussed the idea that history is part of this. So I just want to give you a little bit of that sense. Then I want to talk about some of the stuff that's in the textbook, filter out what I think is the most valuable and interesting aspects of the textbook. Some of it's pretty obvious, but it's still, still stuff that needs to be learned and stuff that needs to be understood. And then toward the end of the class, the end of the lecture, the section, we will discuss some aspects of what we have in front of us in terms of final papers and final examinations. And also, it's been a while, I think, since I've heard from most of you, since we haven't had a test in a little while. And a couple people have chimed in here or there, but I just want to be sure that you're not ghosting me. Because I don't want to get 500 emails right at the end of the semester, okay? So normally this would be the part of the lecture where I would talk about your use of the internet, what you use the most, what you look for on YouTube, what your Instagram page is like, what your Facebook page is like, what your Facebook page might have used to look like, stuff like that. And how often you utilize the internet and social media and so forth. Sometimes when things like this that are so obvious are a little bit hard to explore because they're so obvious. It's like asking you, how do you breathe? How do you convert oxygen into carbon dioxide? Well, you don't ever think about that because you're just busy breathing in and breathing out. You're so busy on the internet all the time that perhaps you're not even sure what it means, how it came about. So I just want to go a little bit briefly talk a little bit about some of the history into how the internet sort of had its long development, okay? So, some of the stuff is in the textbook. Most of it is not in the initial stages. So, you have post-World War II, 1945, okay? The United States of America is victorious in World War II. And after World War II, there's a degree of what you might call economic security in America. First handful of years, half decade or so, 45 to 50, 50 to 55, with some pockets of economic insecurity. But primarily, there is a good decade or so of growth, of economic security and economic growth in America. And with that comes government help in terms of what was called the GI Bill, which was a bill that allowed for veterans of World War II to get very, very cheap loans to build houses, and also very, very cheap loans to go to college, to get a free or next to free college education. So that decade after World War II, 45 to 55, or maybe a little later, there's a degree of what might call upward mobility in the United States. There's a post-World War II baby boom. There's a population growth that happens all during this time period. And there's a great deal of movement from cities overcrowding to newly developed suburbs outside of cities. Long Island itself is a leading example in this, where they build suburb after suburb after suburb. And it happens all around the country, okay? Then, that's just parenthetical to some of the things we're discussing. A key thing occurs in terms of the sciences, and it has to do with how the government, in relationship with really good colleges and institutions, helped to form early computing systems in the United States right after World War II. And what happens is, at the University of Pennsylvania, in my hometown of Philadelphia, you have a very, very rudimentary, basic, early example in America of a computing system. And it is called the ENIAC. E-N-I-A-C. ENIAC, the ENIAC computing system at the University of Pennsylvania, which was the first workable computing system in the country. ENIAC stands for Electronic, Numerical, Integrator, and Computer. Electronic, Numerical, Integrator, and Computer. And its basic functions in the early going was to guide US missile systems for the military. And there was a close relationship in the early going of computing systems between the US military and top flight universities, particularly universities on the West Coast. Stanford University, Cal Tech University, and then a university on the East Coast, MIT, which is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And there's funding, there's government funding. There's government funding that allows for this ongoing research, which first was pretty much allowed for the military, but then it develops and develops and develops half decade by half decade to become much more of a commercial enterprise. That is to say, something that civilians can utilize. This ongoing development of computing systems that allows for the beginning of what we understand to be the internet is really happening right after World War II. Okay, so you have the ENIAC computer at the University of Pennsylvania, and then you have development over the years between West Coast universities and East Coast universities, with a little bit of help from the US military, in something called research and development. Now, research, we understand what it is. Research is the hunting and finding of information that will help a particular kind of problem, right? seeking answers to a particular, and trying to find solutions, and people working in research. Development is just a 50-cent version of the word finding money. When you work in a development office, that means you're trying to get people to give you money so you can do more research. There's a development office at NCC that tries to get money from rich donors in the NCC area of Fairfield County so they can invest in NCC as an institution to try to get students to have an education so they get better jobs. The development office is just a fancy word of trying to get money. So in those days, it was considered important for the US military and the US government to get development, that is to say, to get dollars, tax dollars, public dollars, to help not only fund the military, but fund ongoing research into new computing systems, okay? R&D, research and development, is just a phrase a college students to start to understand. Anyway, what happens is, I have a little sketch of about every decade or so, there's a pretty big development that leads to, what we have today with the pervasiveness of the internet. So the ENIAC computer is the mid-40s, 46, I think, 1946. And, there's 10 times, 100 times more computing systems in your iPhone than there was in that computer. That computer took up a whole room. It was a very, very old-fashioned computer. In the 50s and 60s, there's development of transistor technologies and semiconductor technologies. Transistor technologies and semiconductor technologies. Now, I don't have the jumbo brain to understand exactly what these things did, but the general idea of transistor technologies / semiconductor technologies allowed for the miniaturization of electronic devices. That is to say, making them smaller, okay? I know it seems crazy for you guys to think that this was any big deal, but once you had something called a transistor radio, it meant that you didn't have to plug in a radio. You could take it to the beach with battery packs. Or even sometimes very small televisions could run on battery packs because they had a semiconductor-induced transistor that allowed for some energy to be stored. Again, it wasn't Instagram, right? Or wonderful video games. But it was, for its day in the 50s and 60s, one step further in computing systems. So in the 50s and 60s, you have the development of transistors and semiconductors that allow for making electronic devices smaller, more manageable. In the early 1970s is a big step with the development of the microprocessor. The microprocessor. The microprocessor. Or it's often called the microchip. And again, I am not a jumbo brain in terms of computing systems, but the basic idea of the microprocessor is that you have the brains of a computer, which used to take up a whole wall, into a tiny chip. Into a tiny chip that's put into, at first, not iPhones or cell phones, those weren't invented yet, but things that you could buy around the house that could be useful, like a calculator, like rudimentary video games, like early ways in which you could start to have software versions. Now, you may think to yourself that a calculator is so mundane and so cheap and so archaic that how could that ever be exciting? Believe me, when I was in 3rd and 4th grade and you had a calculator, you could just push buttons and add and subtract and divide and multiply in a second. It was really, really fun, and particularly for somebody as bad at math as I am, it was a lifesaver. And they were expensive, but that's what the microchip did. It allowed for the brains of a computer to be put in a very, very small, precise chip that was put into basic elements like calculators and video games. There weren't desktop computers yet. Not really. Not for domestic use. Not for the house. So 1980s, the big move was the personal computer, the PC. It may seem crazy to you that not everybody had a personal computer in the house, but they didn't. The PC was introduced really by Apple company and allowed for people to actually finally have a computer in their home. And most people didn't know what to do with them because it's not like most people knew how to write programming. So they used it for mainly entertainment and banking and some storage, to actually store files and to have things basically stored on floppy disks or maybe even into a hard drive, and also hook up to a printer to then print their own work. Very, very rudimentary, but a big step in this ongoing process of computing systems. So just a short reenactment here, or short, not reenactment, but short review. You have post-World War II government and smart universities coming together to help with this new computing systems. The first one is the ENIAC out of University of Pennsylvania in 46. Then in the 50s and 60s, you have the combination of transistors with semiconductors to allow for the miniaturization or making electronic devices smaller. In the 1970s, the development of the microprocessor or microchip. 1980s, the development of the home personal computer, where not just people at IBM or other fancy places were working with computers, but people in the home. Okay. 1990s is development of what's called online. And the development of online comes really with something called the World Wide Web. And the World Wide Web is really what made the internet take off, because prior to the World Wide Web, the internet was primarily text only. That is to say, words only. Communication between computing systems from across the country or across the world. Very rudimentary ideas of email, but not video, not movement, not pictures. Stuff would take a long time to download. Stuff would take a long time to get through using old telephone connections. And what's the thing called? The when you used to have to use old landlines, modem, a modem connection to the old landline. Okay. The development of the World Wide Web with what was called HTML allowed for pictures, allowed for images, allowed for movement. And HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And Hypertext Markup Language is the computer programming language that helped develop the World Wide Web and make it the pervasive actor that it is in contemporary society. Because prior to that, it was text only. Okay. Once the World Wide Web came into being and webbed itself to the net, the web is on the net, right? We think of it as the same thing, but technically it isn't. The internet is a series of computer-linked systems together that are able to communicate, whereas the World Wide Web is linked to that web. Okay, I'm sorry, to that net. The web is to that net, okay? And the web is the ability to have graphics and imagery and movement and pictures and so forth. And then after that, in the early to mid 90s, with the development of World Wide Web, the internet itself and the web itself took off, and ever since then it's been the most powerful medium in the past 25 years. Okay. So just a little history there, just a little history to give you a taste of how research and development in every decade were making strides into developing computing systems, which ended up what we have today. And just a quick recap is you have the ENIAC computer in the 40s, development of the transistor with semiconductors to make things smaller electronically, like the transistor radio, transistor television. Then the development of the microchip in the early 70s. Then the development of the personal computer in the 1980s. Then the development of what's considered online. And not just the internet, which is a series of linked computing systems together, but the World Wide Web. And the World Wide Web's power comes from the programming language of hypertext markup language, which allowed the web to grow and to change the internet from text only to graphics and imagery and movement and video and pictures and so forth. Okay? So that's just a kind of nutshell, thumbnail sketch history of research and development into computing systems since the World War II, leading up until the 1990s and early 2000s. Okay? In terms of aspects of the textbook, in Chapter 6, I'd like you to look at page 169, please. 169. And on 169, there's a sidebar definition of the internet. I know it seems stupid to try to define the internet, but let me define it one more time. It's more or less what this definition says, but it's a little bit more, it's a little less verbose, a little bit more common. The internet is a series of linked computing systems that are able to communicate with one another. Okay, it's the basic, bare bones definition of this thing called the internet. And it was primarily developed between West Coast universities and East Coast universities through the 60s and 70s with the help of the US military and in conjunction with the US military and the funding of the US military. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind as we learn about the internet. I'd like you to look at page 170, please. 170, where it says HTML. That's a sidebar definition, HTML. Okay? A computer language system that allowed people to access a system of interlinked documents through the internet. HTML is used to define the structure, content, and layout of a page by using what are called tags. Hypertext markup language allowed for people to search through the internet and then tap into certain pages or tags that, with development and development and development, move the internet from text only to images and graphics. And they describe this on 170 in the textbook, okay? And they called that development the World Wide Web. I know it seems stupid to mention this as if you don't know what the World Wide Web is, but if you had to define it, you have to think about what it means, okay? Remember, the web is on the net, not the other way around. They give some interesting demographics of internet users, which I'm sure has changed by the time this has been printed on page 171. Take a look at that if you wish. And then there's a very interesting timeline on 172 and 173. An interesting timeline on 172 and 173. You do not have to memorize this timeline on 172 and 173. Just look through it. They talk about the ENIAC computer in the 1940s. They talk a little bit about movement with computing systems through the 60s and 70s and all the way up to the 2010s. They talk about Facebook. They talk about YouTube. They talk about people who were behind the first web browsers and so forth, okay? Pretty basic stuff, but you have to give some respect to history, like we have in all of our media so far this semester. 172, 173. Again, you don't have to memorize it, just get a sense of it. On page 175, Joseph Turow talks a little bit about two things that I think are, valuable and pretty easy to understand. Number one is called user-generated content. User-generated content. That's a pretty basic definition, but it's something you should really know and be able to speak about as educated media scholars. And what it says is creative products, such as videos or music, generated by people who visit websites such as Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. User-generated content is just a fancy way of saying that there are people who use the internet to generate content, not unlike this old man right now on YouTube because he's forced to. I can't do it in the classroom because of COVID-19, and I'm generating content of this particular class to put on the world, the YouTube world, for you to see and explore and understand. It's a pretty basic definition, but it's something each student should have a firm grasp of understanding what it is. And in normal circumstances, I think I had one other thing on YouTube in my life, which my wife put up to embarrass me. I'll tell you more about that another time. Okay? It's nothing too major. And the other obvious idea on page 175, is Internet Service Provider, ISP. A company that sells access to the internet. For me, it's Optimum cable company. I'm sure it is for you too. And they're so far keeping us in business because without the internet service provider, I wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff. Okay? That's a pretty basic definition, but it is a 101 class. Okay? Over on 178, they discuss this idea of network neutrality. Network neutrality. Net neutrality. Proposition that ISPs should treat all traffic on the internet equally. Net neutrality means that the ISP, the internet service provider, must treat all traffic on the internet equally, the same. Which means that as long as you pay for your access to the internet, that you should be able to go to anywhere you wish to on the internet at the speed at which your computer will take you, and the internet service provider will provide this service equally. Now, ever since the internet and the World Wide Web were going in the 1990s, the Federal Communications Commission has safeguarded net neutrality, and that's a good thing. That means that anybody can access the internet, as long as they pay their way to get on the internet, they can utilize it, and they can utilize it at the same speed at which it doesn't matter where they go. Now, if they go to some criminal websites or terrible stuff like that, I mean, they're watched by the FBI. But net neutrality means that it's equal for everyone to go anywhere they want, and also for people who are very, very good at doing interesting things to become entrepreneurs on the internet can use the internet fair and square. Now, a couple of years ago, the Trump administration's pick to run the FCC got rid of net neutrality. So technically speaking, cable providers and internet service providers, technically speaking, can slow down or speed up our access to the internet if they wanted to do so. They haven't done it yet. But as fewer and fewer cable companies are out there, the access to the internet in the United States is run through the cable companies. And if they have competitors, they may want to slow you down to their competition. And what they're hoping to do is maybe charge us twice. Sort of like the difference between having cable and having cable with HBO, where you have to pay a little bit more for HBO. They may want to do the same thing with their access to the internet. Now that everybody uses the internet all the time, they have us. They know we're going to pay, and they may slow us down if we want to go to their competitor's website. So for instance, ABC owns Disney, and Disney owns Disney owns ABC, and they own a lot of other media companies. And they may have they may be in competition with people from, say, NBC, and NBC is owned by Comcast. That's a cable company. So if Comcast wants to stop you from going to Disney websites, they may charge you twice for a fast lane and a slow lane. But if net neutrality were actually working, you wouldn't be allowed to do that. But the Trump administration's pick for the FCC changed those rules. Now, they haven't done anything yet, but they could. And here's hoping that if they either change their minds or a new FCC commissioner comes in next January 22nd, or next January 20th, if Trump loses the election. But the basic idea is net neutrality treats all internet traffic equally, and you don't have to pay more or less for it. You have to pay for it once, and then you're on the internet. It's fair and free exchange of ideas on the internet is what net neutrality means. Okay, so just keep that in mind as you're looking through chapter 6, page 178. Page 181, click and mortar companies. Click and mortar companies. Click and mortar companies. This is pretty basic. This is firms with both online and offline sales presence. This seems even stupid to go over, but as more and more people actually shop online, most stores have a brick and mortar store. Like if you want to go to, I don't know, Target or something, and you want to go in and buy a few things, that's brick and mortar because it's made of stone and brick, and you walk in. But of course, Target has an online version, and maybe you can get Target to send it to you through UPS or however you get it. And that is called click and mortar. It's just a cute play on words between brick and mortar and click and mortar. That's pretty easy to understand. I'm sure you've all utilized click and mortar in terms of the ideas of commercial sales. That's on 181. And the rest of the chapter is pretty basic stuff, and it's not that long. Okay, so that's all the information we need for chapter 6. What that brings me to for both the Tuesday night class, section 2, and the Monday and Wednesday class, section 1, is that ostensibly we're more or less through with the material. So in terms of section 1, technically there would have been a class this Monday and this Wednesday. 427 and 429. I will have another class for you on 429, or before 429, which will essentially be a review and also a discussion of your final papers, which are due at the end of the semester. And then the week after that will be essentially the same thing with some room for you to work on your papers yourselves. Okay? For the Tuesday night class, it's the same idea. It's just that, we only meet once a week. So what we would have had is 428 analysis of the internet. That was this evening. And then 5.5 and 5.12. So 5.5, May 5th, will be review. Okay? And it'll even be earlier than that because I'll do it the same time I do Mass Comm 101. And 5.12 will be your final exam, and I'll hand out your final exam on 5.12. Before 5.12, and it'll be due sometime, say 4 or 5 days later, and so will your final papers. And for the 101 class, for the Monday, Wednesday class, it'll be similar. Your final will either be, it's either Monday, May 11th, or Wednesday, May 13th. Let's just say it's Wednesday, May 13th, okay? So I have to have final grades in, tabulated, finished, completely in by May 20th. In fact, I'd like to have them everything in earlier than that so I can grade. I can't grade all those in one day. So I will let you know for sure when both of these exams will be due, but they'll probably be due around the 16th or 17th of May with the final paper. Okay? So what I'll do right now is I'll talk a little bit about the final paper. I hope you all have this piece of paper that I had given out when we were still at NCC. Here it is. If you want to, take a picture of that, I'll leave it up there for 20 seconds or so. Okay. Now, I just want to go over some of these. There's basically only two options, and the third option is up to you. The first option I'll read. Pick any of the major conglomerates as shown in chapter 6 and investigate how that company uses its entire media to sell its various media products. One should examine how these media companies utilize their media holdings to consistently promote their materials and generate revenue. See the Who Owns What website for more information. So basically, what I'm talking about there is one large major conglomerate. You want to do Disney, you want to do Paramount, Viacom or Comcast. It doesn't matter to me which one you do. But what I want you to do is I want you to investigate as best you can online aspects of this particular company that has to do with power, that has to do with how many bullets they have in their chamber, so to speak, to help sell all the products. So you may remember from the preface to chapter 6, when we were talking about Disney last week, that idea of synergy on page 166. You know, how Disney is the major company and they have all these other companies under here that they own. There's even more and more and more now. And you can talk about how each of these are sold, selling each other without the general public realizing that they all fall under the umbrella of Disney. And you can pick any conglomerate you want. But what I don't want is I don't want a fan letter. I don't want you to be like, Disney's great. You can do this and this and this and this. What you're trying to figure out is, how are things popular? They become popular, yeah, because sometimes they're good. But also sometimes it's just marketing that's so overwhelming that the consumer has very little choice in the matter. You want to try to investigate a company from how many other companies they own and help to sell, to manipulate the masses into buying things and absorbing things and seeing things that may or may not be interesting or valuable. But the culture is celebrating because there's only a handful of media companies that own the entire popular culture. Or you could do number 2, comparing and contrast any two differing types of the same medium. For example, one could compare and contrast two magazines aimed at female readership like Cosmopolitan and Ms. Magazine. Often a number of young female students do this one. I think it's a good example because Ms. Magazine, that is to say MS period, Ms. Magazine, is a magazine that is for female readership. And Cosmopolitan is a magazine that's for female readership. But both of these magazines reach their audiences in two completely different ways. So you can compare how one tries to, what's in the magazine, with the other one, what's in the magazine, and you will see tangible differences. You will see differences in the advertising. You will see differences in the articles. You will see differences that you can start to mull over in your head, like, why does this magazine do it this way and this magazine do it that way? So, for instance, Cosmopolitan is a very splashy magazine. It's a fancy magazine. It's a kind of a fun magazine. And it has very beautiful women who often show cleavage on the cover. And much of the articles have to do about sex and sexuality and how to get a man, and how to lose 5 pounds, and how to do your best Kegels, or, this kind of stuff. Whereas Ms. Magazine is actually about real women's issues. It tries to talk about how women are paid less than men for the same job. It tries to talk about abortion debates. It tries to talk about how women are objectified in the media. And there is no advertising in Ms. Magazine. And there's nothing but tons of advertising in Cosmopolitan magazines. So the differences are tangible. Okay, they really are. They're really tangible. Now, Ms. is a little bit hard to get, so maybe you have to look online. But and now you can't shop as easily as before. But if you want to do that, I think it would be good. But if people are interested in doing magazines, please don't do similar magazines. Students in the past have done Road and Track and Car and Driver. That's essentially the same magazine, or like Sports Illustrated and ESPN magazine. There's no real tangible differences between those magazines. Not really. I mean, there's some, but not really. So if you're going to pick a magazine that you like, you have to pick a magazine that's named at the same audience that's nothing like that, right? Because then you'll be able to see tangible differences. The Ms. and Cosmo is the best example of that. In fact, even some boys have done it. Excuse me, guys, I should say, right? But for the female readership, I think it'd be an easier piece to write. I swear, you can get 2.5 pages easy on each magazine if you're able to get your hands on one of them. Okay, or you could do a topic of your own choosing. Okay, so just try to run that by me. I don't want like a soc paper. Do you know what I mean? I don't want you combining a paper that you're going to do for sociology or speech, like abortion debate or legalization of marijuana or against the military or something, a military draft. I don't want another subjects paper. I want a paper about media that you're interested in doing. Okay. It has to be 5 pages long, which is not that hard. Double spaced, typed in double space. I think we'll try to do double spaced. I mean, you're gonna have to send it to me in a Word document. Okay. And they'll both be due at the end of the semester. Whenever we say the final is, that's when your final paper is due. And I can't, you have to give it to me in an email attachment along with your final. So I would start thinking about that if you haven't thought about it already, and email me if you have any thoughts about this, okay? So also, both these particular classes, I haven't talked much with too many people lately or emailed much with any people lately in either of these classes. The Tuesday night class, there's some people in the Tuesday night class that just haven't gotten back to me at all. I don't know what's happened to you. I pray to God that you're okay. I don't know. You know who you are. You haven't answered. You haven't done test 2. I've sent email after email. I've called whatever phone number is there in the banner list, and you know who you are. I hope to good God that you're okay. Your family's okay. I don't know what to say. The Tuesday night section, there's at least 3 of you that just haven't gotten back to me at all. So I'm not sure what to do about this. I've tried. I mean, you know where I am. You can email me. My heart, my prayers go out to you if you're sick. I don't know what to say. But you have to get back in touch with me. If you're at all in that class, you have to email me. You have to. I don't know what to do. And for the 101 class in the day, the Monday, Wednesday, section 1, I think most of you have at least gotten back to me once. I'm pretty sure. Some of you have not at all. I want you to do me a favor. Just send me an email saying, yeah, I'll be getting the YouTube videos. This is Joe Blow. This is John Smith. This is Jane Smith. Com 101, section 1. Yes, getting the emails. Talk to you soon. That's just it. If you're going to email me, identify who you are. I have over 100 students. If you don't identify who you are, it's kind of a pain to track everybody down. But for those of you who are hearing the sound of my voice right now, just try to send me an email saying, yeah, hi, yes, it's Jane Smith or it's John Smith, whatever, Com 101, section 1. I got it. I understand what's happening. I've been watching the YouTube videos. Yes, it's Jane Smith, Com 101, section 2, Tuesday nights. Yes, I understand what's happening. Take care. Like, just shoot me one of those emails soon, okay? Because I'd like to know as we go from April to May where we all stand. And we have some time. There's some time built into the syllabus for us to kind of review and to like get a sense of where we're going. But by May 17th or so, it's all got to be handed in an email attachment, okay? The other thing is, don't forget about pre-reg, guys. Normally, I would be talking your ear off about pre-registering for the fall semester and pre-registering for even the summer semester. Now, I'm teaching a summer film studies course. Now, it's all online because everything's online this summer. And I haven't even done Blackboard yet. I have to learn how to do Blackboard. I haven't done it yet. So sign up if you wish. I'll do my best on Blackboard. It's a film studies course, so you might have to watch some films outside of the class. You will have to watch some films outside of the classroom. And I will use the Blackboard thing. I don't even know how it works, but we'll do it. And it's a good way to get 3 credits out of the way. It's most of the month of June. And it's concentrated a couple hours a day, 2 hours, I think, a day, Monday through Thursday. And I hope it goes. I don't know if it'll go, and I don't know what your plans are, but If you can't do the summer course, that's fine. But you really have to make sure that you're trying to think ahead for the fall. And I don't know the 101 students as well because I haven't seen you in weeks. And I'm hoping that you can take, if you're interested in taking some more mass communication classes, that would be great. I would love for you to do that. Please go online and look at the classes that are being offered in the fall. Now, because of a kind of screw up, all of the faculty names are not listed right now. It just says staff. But I am teaching Intro to Mass Comm again. I'm teaching 2 film studies courses in the fall. One is called American Film, Communication Arts 157. And if we're back in the classroom in the fall, which I pray to God that we are, that class meets once a week. I lecture for about an hour, then you watch a film for about an hour and a half. And it's all independent cinema. And then we go over the film and we go over what it means and how it works visually and how it works contextually and so forth. I'm also teaching another film class on Thursdays, Communication Arts 256, Focus on the Director. It's a film studies course. Famous movie makers over the last 100 years or so. Same idea. I talk for about an hour and change. Then you watch a movie for about an hour and change, and then we discuss it some more. Once a week, okay? There's also film and TV production courses being offered. In fact, hopefully the film production studio, the television studio is going to be rebuilt this summer. Hopefully, I'm not 100% sure about that, but hopefully. There's a number of courses, introductory courses. There's a journalism course that's being offered. There's a media writing course being offered. There's a digital journalism course being offered. So there's lots of communication arts classes being offered. I hope to good God we're back in the classroom, but a couple of things are going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with the economy, but I'm willing to bet that a number of students at UConn and WestConn and so forth, I'm willing to bet that their parents are going to have them go to community college for a year or so because things are going to be expensive and the economy could be bad. So I'm hoping that our numbers will be okay, but you kind of have to think ahead. Now, the difficulty is you have to do this yourself online, but I'll try to help you. I want to find out what classes you have or need. So please don't wait till the last minute, okay? Pre-registration is pretty important, and God knows what's going to be happening in the fall, but hopefully your education will still be part of it. So consider that as we move forward. Also, just keep on keeping on, man. I hope that you're all safe. I hope that you're all managing. I hope you're all doing well. I do have some students, not that I've heard of in your classes, but I've heard students in some of my other classes that have been suffering with COVID, and most of them are better. But there's one boy, he's still kind of sick, and he's doing the best he can. And most of them have gotten over it pretty easily. Not easily, but gotten over it by now is what I mean to say. And just keep on taking it seriously. It's very serious. Obviously, you know this by now, right? It's extremely serious. So if you have to leave the house, you have to leave to go to the post office or to CVS or whatever, be absolutely certain that you're washing your hands. Get some hand sanitizer, put it in your car. Wear that mask, wear those gloves if you've got them, but as soon as you get in your car after you've gone somewhere, put a little bit on and wipe it all around. Wipe your car wheel down, your steering wheel. Wipe your keys down. And then as soon as you get home, wash the heck out of those hands. Okay. Please send me an email. Let me know that you're doing these videos. Let me know that you're doing your best. And when you watch the videos, hit pause once in a while. Write a few things down. Okay. All the information will be in the videos. They're there. And the supplementary textbook stuff that I've been giving. And look for your emails. Please look for your emails. A number of my students are just like, yeah, I haven't been looking at my emails. Like, I don't know what to say. It's all email. You have to do it. You have to do it. I know this is unprecedented times, and all will be forgiven on my end, but you can't ghost me, okay? Particularly if you're healthy, and I know things are weird, but just got to get back to me, okay? All right, I'm going to send out an email right now to 101, both sections, to let you know that this is up. And we do have some buffer time. Next week will be mainly review time and for you to start working on your papers. Maybe get a page or two in the books, okay? Have a good evening and stay safe. I miss you guys. I miss both classes. I miss you guys a lot. Be well.